This is Women in Linux. Welcome to the Women in Linux podcast, exposing women to information and careers in technology.
This is Women in Linux podcast with your host Dee Parler and Tamika Reed. Today we have joining us is Quiessence Phillips. She's the VP of Cybersecurity Operations, focused on incident response at Barclays.
Well, Quiessence, thank you for coming on the podcast today with Women in Linux. I've been following you for a while, and actually I've been following you since I am a female. Oh no, I'm an engineer. That thread that went out, I think it was last year, and everybody was posting their pictures. And also I've been following you since Maria, she introduced me to you online when they were doing their Women in Tech chats. So I think we've talked briefly, back and forth through chats, but we never actually had we never physically met, and we haven't had a chance to chat. So here it is, we're getting a chance to chat. So right. I want to open up with, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you really got into security and then into the position that you're in now at Barclays?
Sure. So as you said, my name is Quiessence, and so I guess going back to undergrad, I studied comp sci or computer science and had a concentration in security in my last year. So around that time, security was picking up a little bit, nowhere near what it is now. And I got wind of this. It kind of fueled my passion for maybe investigation and technology at the same time. So I was more intrigued by it. So I took a few modules on security where I worked on several cybersecurity focused projects, which helped me land an internship with the Federal Reserve Bank of New York at the time. So I went into the National Incident Response Team with that company, or that quasi-government organization. And from there, I just had several roles where I worked on our Security Operations Center, worked in our Incident Detection and Analysis Center, worked on some threat intelligence, and ending my tenure there was leading our security operations for both the Federal Reserve, Bank of New York, all of the Federal Reserves nationally, and some agencies of Treasury. After that, I would say I did a stint in startup where I worked with a threat intelligence agency, and we worked mostly with financial institutions, conducting threat intelligence assessments, doing third-party oversight, et cetera. After that, I believe that's when I came to Barclays. And since being at Barclays, I've held a couple positions, an AVP role and a VP role. And now in my VP role, I am leading our U.S. operations for incident response. And I have about a 7-person team under me here in the U.S., and globally we have a much larger team. But yeah, that pretty much states my experience up until now in a nutshell.
In a nutshell. Oh, so you said some key things there, some internships, and also what you learned in school. So I actually went and got my master's in information assurance, and my undergrad was in computer engineering. But something you said in there that was key, that was just a little focused in college on security, not like how it is now. And that just kind of shows you how the times have changed. But with that, what would you say now to someone who's in school studying security? What focus or what, I guess, drill would you tell someone to drill down into? Because I get a lot of people that want to talk about, they get their Security Plus, or they want to get their CISSP, but then there's so many aspects to security.
There are, and I get that question a lot also, and I end up punting the question back to whomever is asking to try to see if they've explored the field at all, or to see the many disciplines that there are here that they could explore. and because of this, I had wrote an article on this, and it uses like a question first model, where you kind of ask yourself a series of questions to see where your interest would best be aligned with a specific area of cybersecurity. And I think that kind of gets us to or closer to a point to know, okay, maybe I want to go into, I don't know, risk assessment, or I want to go into penetration testing, or I want to be an incident responder. Like, there's so many different areas. So to say what someone should actually drill into is really pretty difficult without at least speaking to the person and trying to understand where their interests lie. But I definitely think studying in school, it's very different than it was before, because before you had to have like a base level knowledge all around, just, networking, engineering, OS base, et cetera. And now you kind of go straight into like an information security type of degree, which might leave out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think to me, it leaves out a lot of fundamentals that you will need in the field. But yeah, it's not a dig against, where the industry is going, or where, the educational system is going. It's just, I think we're just trying to keep up with the trend and offer what people are interested in. But I definitely think it starts with trying to identify the areas that you may be of interest. And even if you don't want to, even if you can't say, I'm interested in this specific field, but maybe just have just explore a little bit. And I'm a project first person, so I would always say, okay, if this seems like it's interesting to you, then maybe start some type of project in that area. And the community is so loving. For me, I think like everybody wants to help the people who are helping themselves. So if you're out there in the forums or any type, you develop some type of script, or you contribute to some type of project or to someone's GitHub, like, you're going to learn so much in that process. Set up a VM, and it's so easy now on AWS or RAM node or anything to just set up a server and kind of dig in and try to see, maybe put out a honeypot and, see the type of traffic that's coming to you, and, what does this mean? And that may get you into looking at packets, et cetera. So you'll see what fuels your fire, right? So that's kind of like where I would suggest people do, instead of just saying, okay, go to school for this.
Right. You're more like how I started, kind of like self-taught type of thing. You set up a server back in the day. You set up a desktop or whatever, and you just start playing. And that's always been that's what I tell people is, pick something and play with it, because you can go to school, but it may not be something that you're interested in. Like you spend all this time at school, and then you realize, like, oh, I really don't even like this. Like, and then you end up switching majors, and it costs you more money, and then there's more time when you could have just played on the side to kind of figure out what your focus would be. And then in that instance, some things are not even taught in school. And like you say, it's no dig on the school. It's just some things just not taught. And so you have to kind of do your own research, kind of in parallel with going to school. Now,
Right.
out of all of that, what are the technical skills, I guess, that have propelled you to where you're at now? Maybe list about 5 or 10 that you've learned along the way, or that you kind of went into your position that you're in with now, that you would recommend someone having. I know you mentioned like networking and understanding the operating system. I'm going to claim those as 2 of those. I'm going to claim that as
Yep.
2 of
So
those.
definitely those two are very strong points. I would also say some level of programming, and not to say you need to be a developer, but you definitely have to have some level of programming. Whether Python's very big. There's still people that love Perl. Even if you just know some bash scripting. But some level of programming would definitely be helpful for you. From a security perspective, the ability to analyze threats, to be able to analyze data, understanding packets, having that good, and that goes back to networking, but understanding of protocols, etc. Problem solving is huge. And also soft skills are very important as well. So strong communication, good writing abilities, organization. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've seen good analysis and extremely poor documentation. So it causes issues all around, from audit perspective, quality control, ability to hand over incidents to teammates and escalation points, etc. So I definitely think you should have an all-around broad spectrum of skills. Those base level fundamentals, and based on your discipline, some more specific skills. So like for me, I needed to learn more about malware analysis, reverse engineering. So when we're looking at malware, we can reverse engineer it, understand what it's doing, what type of functions it's using, how can we prevent this going forward. In my work, I do a lot of, even though it's incident response, we do a lot of preventative work as well. So we always want to take the gems that we've learned along the way and apply them back into our defensive posture to enhance that. So I would definitely say, I think that's about 7 maybe.
Right, right. And I agree with all of those, especially when you talk about reverse engineering, because I'm always looking at stuff like, okay, well, how did they get to this point? Like it's kind of like you're reading a book backwards. You start off with the end, and then you go backwards to say, okay, well, what happened in the beginning? I know the ending, but how did we get to this point? And that's a good thing. I don't know how to break. I don't know. You may can help me with this one. How could that someone who's starting out, how would they start understanding reverse engineering a product or something of that nature? What would be like, I guess, a foundation for that?
So I don't know if reverse engineering is the first thing that you would jump into. So if you're looking to go more of the down the malware analysis path, I would definitely say that or incident response path. Understanding malware is one. So looking at samples, there's databases full of malicious samples out there that's free to use. Maybe download them into some type of VM, run some tools against them. You can initially you can do some dynamic analysis just to see how the malware performs, what it does on your system, and just watch. And that's learning in itself. So you can spawn up a few tools to actually show you what the difference before and after you run the malicious sample. Let's say you can run red shot, so your registry you can look at the registry before and after, or you can run process explorer to see what processes have spawned, what is this malware actually doing to your system. So that's one. Going a little bit deeper, and I think as you get familiar with that, you can start looking at the malware statically and looking at the code. How is this code performing? In what order are certain things taking place? How does that have an effect on my system? Is there any encryption involved? You can kind of look at the strings and see. You can learn tons just from strings. And I think those are like the fundamental steps that you will want to take if you're going down that road, and then you will go more into the reverse engineering, because it is a little bit more difficult. You're now looking at assembly language, machine language, and that's a little daunting. If you know what I mean. So,
Oh, I love
yeah.
assembly language. That's
You
like when
love
I think
assembly.
about, yeah, I love assembly language. Like that's my thing. Like let's break out the board. Let's hook it up to the serial port, and then let's go in and find out what's in the registry, what moved over into this memory location. Oh man, that was fun. That
Right.
that was fun for me. I know I'm geeking out. Don't pay me no mind. That was
Definitely.
fun. That was fun for me. So
Yeah,
no, we
and
talked.
there's lots of free courses and stuff online for that stuff.
Mhm.
And I think that's the beauty of tech, right? Because so many people are in tech because they're passionate about it. So they do these amazing projects or put this stuff online and just make it free for everyone. And it's like a win all around for everybody, and for the future generations especially, or even for us who are just trying to continue education in other areas.
Mhm.
So the information's out there.
And I have to say, like when I started, so I'm old school. I started back in 2000. It wasn't any information out there. It was, I mean, we didn't, it just wasn't. Information didn't come freely, and you joined forums, and the forums were abusive. Like it wasn't really a big push on security until people really started getting hacked all the time. And then everybody was like, we need to do something about it. Secure your VM, secure everything, lock down everything, So, and then that spawns SE Linux and Red Hat and then a whole slew of other things. So I think from an admin perspective, we still have some security that we do, but it's never on the level of reverse engineering or digging down into the malware or running an S trace or a D trace or something like. Yeah, we're not that deep, but I just know what those tools do and how they work, just because I just played with them on my own. That's
Right.
just really what that is. And I know you mentioned some websites and so forth. Do you have any books or websites or podcasts that you would recommend at this point that you may continuously use, or something that you built yourself?
Sure. Let's see. Books. I know one, you might be familiar with this from back in the day. It's a really old book, but it's a staple. The Cuckoo's Egg. That's a really good one. Malware Analyst Cookbook. That's another one. Shell Coder's Handbook, Hacking Exposed. Some of these books are very technical, like a little bit technical, like Shell Coder's Handbook is very technical, but then like Cuckoo's Egg is more like a novel, really gets you into understanding like how certain things work if you're trying to hack in or you're trying to identify when adversaries get into your network. But it's a really easy read and it's addicting. Hacking Exposed is a good one. The Incident Responders Handbook. Spam Nation is fairly new. Countdown to Zero Day. I think those are really good books to get someone started. Even people
Hmm.
who've been in security for a while or just maybe other technical fields and looking to learn a little bit more about security. Those are great. From a
Right.
podcast perspective, I don't listen to many security podcasts. Only ones that I really listen to here and there are Fans Internet Storm Center podcast. It's super short and informative. It's just based on what's happening in the wild at the moment and data-driven security. From a website perspective, my favorites are Cybrary, like library, but Cybrary.
Hmm.
They have it's all open, all free, and they have cybersecurity like content galore, all given or posted by different people in the field who are just lending their knowledge. And then Hack the Box. Hack the Box is really cool because it allows you to test your skills. So I believe it's like more like pen testy type, but it's really cool.
Yeah, I see it now. I have never heard of Hack the Box. That one's a new one for me. So
Yeah, that one's cool too because you can't even get in until you can solve the initial problem because they felt like if you can't solve the problem to get in, then you won't be able to do the work once you're in.
right. And that
Yeah.
kind of reminds me of like a CTF. I don't know, have you participated in a
Yep.
CTF before? Okay, yeah. That's what it kind of reminds me of. Like, I know here in Tampa they have like CTF events all the time. And they actually have classes that train you on, you know, not necessarily what a CTF is, but you have to take some preliminary classes before you even can participate in the CTF. So it's pretty
Mm.
cool. So I like those things. I was like, but it just that just takes up a lot of time when you're focused on like 5 million things. You can't focus on everything. You gotta kind of break all that stuff down into one.
You're listening to Women in Linux.
So now that you're over at Barclays and you have people under you, and you're now VP, what have you found to be the most challenging?
Mm. That's a great question. I would say I'm kind of like one of those selfless leaders. I would say like the most challenging piece for me in this role is ensuring that my direct reports are constantly being challenged. So I'm invested in my own career, of course, but also in the career of the people who report to me. So it's important for me to stay engaged with them, not just on a BAU or business as usual perspective, but also from like projects that will push them outside of their comfort zone and closer to their goals. Like I'm very interested in helping them tap into their potential and pushing them where I see, they may be weak, even if it's not an area that they want to focus on. And that's from a technical and a soft skill perspective. So I have one of my guys who, and mind you, I have no women on my team. So one of my guys is technically adept and is a great forensic analyst, but not that great with writing reports and not that great with communication skills. So I always push him to communicate more, to overly communicate, to, work on how he manages relationships, because all of that stuff ties in and it's only going to make him better. So although our responsibilities are being met by, the technical work that he's doing, I just feel like it allows him to grow and be a better person and be a better analyst if he can improve in these areas for which he's weak.
So have you found like being in that role with all men on the team, has that been challenging for you as a woman as far as the dynamics goes? Because I work with all men all the time, so I know and I think it's person dependent, and I think it depends on who you're working with. But I don't know. Sometimes there are challenges, and sometimes they're just not. I think they may be true in all positions. But have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, and I hear horror stories about some people in these positions, but I've been fortunate. Like, I have not had bad experiences. What I'd say is a challenge, like you said, I think it definitely depends on the group of people for whom you work with. Um, but like with these group of guys, like it's great, and I think that's also goes to my personality. Like, I love my girlfriends, but I like working with guys, and it's just different. And not that I would not love to have more women involved. There's just certain things that
I get
we
it.
do
I get
differently.
it. I get it. I get
and
it.
and I'm all about the girl power for sure, but I like working with guys. I don't mind it at all. I'm not very sensitive, and I told my dad, like, I definitely think that I was supposed to be a man. Like, my chromosomes got changed or something, because I don't know. Like,
I no,
I don't.
I get it. I mean, but that's glad you actually brought that up, because that is a conversation that comes up when with women in tech. Um, in I don't want to say necessarily say roles of power, but just in tech period, that that if you're in tech, I don't want to say men aren't sensitive, but you know it's often said that women are sensitive or oversensitive, or if you've been in tech a long time, you kind of desensitized, so you tend to think more like a man. And that's what most people say about engineers in general, that are women, that they think more like a man, when I don't really think it's thinking like a man. I just think it's just looking at what it is and stepping outside of the box and being able to convey what you're seeing back to whoever, and being okay with that. If somebody responds in a negative way, being okay with that and say, okay, well, I'm take that in consideration, and then being able to, you know, battle your point is, I guess, what it boils down to. But I totally understand where you're coming from and what you're saying. But I think
Yeah.
it's hard, but I understand.
Yeah, it is. I guess it's a battle. But I'm totally, like you said, it's not really a gender issue. It's more of, we just think logically. More engineers in the field, or more women who are just in technology, period, versus being your emotional side being triggered more often. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I love it that I'm more logical, and I mean, I can tap into my emotions when I want to, but maybe that has a hindrance in my personal life. Because I'm more logical. Guys are like, Do you have any emotions? But
Right,
yeah.
right. I get it. A plus B equals C, and let's keep it moving. That's not logical. If I get it. I understand where you're coming from. Now, in your
Right.
role, it sounds like you're more of a mentor as well in your position. Have you yourself ever sought out a mentor, and what did you look for if you did?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know a lot of people are always looking for mentors. I feel like my mentors have always come from just people who I've been around, and maybe I admired certain things about them, and I would just insert myself more in their lives. Like, hey, let's go to lunch, or if I seen, maybe we have like a new managing director and he's doing some awesome work, or I saw him speak and he sounds great, or there's a new woman in a high position here, and she looks like a boss, and I want to talk to her. So
Mhm.
for me, I kind of just, I don't really have a method to it. I just introduce myself, and I think people kind of hear about you based on the work that you've done, and I think also people respect that you will kind of go after what you want. So I'm pretty persistent with certain things. So I was very much interested in meeting with a managing director that we had, that was working on a lot of security projects here at Barclays. And so I sent him an email, put a meeting invite on his calendar, and he canceled on me like 3 times. And I came by his office like, listen, you canceled 3 times. Like, how can we ever have lunch? Should we just go out and get something? Like, you look free right now. And he's like, no, no, no. I really appreciate that you've been so persistent. I really want to meet with you. I've just been so busy. He's like, let's go right now. So, and we've had a great relationship ever since then. So I definitely think it's for me, it's kind of just been people in my environment that I saw something in them that was very interesting to me, and I wanted to learn more and about their story, and maybe I could pull some gems out of that and apply that to my own life or career.
That makes sense. Do you mentor outside or do any work outside of your current role? I know it's hard to kind of balance like 5 million things, but do you do anything like go to a meetup or something of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentor just by virtue of that. So we work with a lot of students, and especially the young women who come into the program. They're always interested in, talking to me, and I see them through their journey. So, and like I said, like for me, I notice like people like to help people who help themselves, and I'm the same way. Like if I see a young woman who is hungry and who is doing what she needs to do to get ahead, and maybe just need some advice, etc., or a sounding board, I'm totally there. Like, so I make myself available to kind of have, whether it's like a monthly or bi-monthly checkpoint to see, okay, what's going on? How are things? Do you need guidance on this? Or, what are you doing in school? Like, how are things going? What internships did you apply for? Do you need a reference letter? All of that. And, kind of sending them ideas for projects, etc. So I definitely do that type of mentorship, and I love it. So I definitely think the more of us in this field is just going to make it better.
You're listening to Women in Linux.
Now, going back to something we talked about earlier, and that was, documentation. I have a question on here about agile and sprint codes, but out in deployments. But I'm gonna change that. I always think documentation is key. I'm the queen of screenshots and and documenting, but something that I also think that's across the board in tech is documentation and communication. Do you have any steps or any type of, I guess, good ways for someone who may not be working, but they may be in school, that they can actually use and follow to create better documentation and create better communication, which leads to better networks? But do you have any, I guess, a formula per se, or some tools that you use that you would recommend that someone who's in school or just studying on their own should use?
That's a good question. I would say, so for me, and I think I probably learned this back, I had this one third grade teacher, Miss McCoffey, who was on my case like crazy. But certain things stick out from childhood, and I've continued to apply that, but to always start off your documentation as if whomever is reading it does not know anything about what you're talking about. So I think in this field, especially technical people, we tend to use a lot of technical jargon or speak in a way that we expect people to know what we're talking about. And we can't do that, especially if we're writing reports for executives or we're writing any type of publication or anything for others that may not be in the field. So always prefacing any technical jargon, I say, with an explanation of what this is, or who this is targeted to, etc. So that's one big thing. Two, I would say be very concise in your documentation, because I don't want to read any more than I have to. Like, I read tons of books already. So if I'm reading a report, just give me the facts. You can give me like an executive summary if you want, but I want to get to the meat of it and move on. So learning how to be concise, and also from a communication standpoint, I would say you have to just do it. That's something that is like a trained skill, where the more you communicate, the better you are at it. The more books you read, the more words you learn, So if you're writing more documentation and you're speaking to more people, you're naturally going to get better at it. So even if that means, you're just talking to yourself in the mirror and reciting certain things, or of how you would approach a certain situation, then do that. Because when you get into that situation, then you're going to be much better off, because you're going to feel more comfortable because you've done this already. You have, recited whatever it is tons of times to yourself. And I actually still do that sometimes. Like, if I'm doing some type of presentation, I will stand in my mirror and I will talk to myself. And it really helps me. And I'll actually, even when I do like, a PowerPoint presentation or something at a conference, I'll write it all out. I'm not one for like a lot of context on screen. I want to give you specific points, and I want you to listen to me, look at me, be engaged with me. And I think those are very valuable insights for people to understand how to engage with your audience. Looking people in the eye is like something that a lot of people don't do anymore. And it's such a strong point, because I want to feel like you're looking at me, you're focused on me. And if I'm not giving you eye contact, then you're not giving me eye contact. And it also shows a level of professionalism and, confidence in yourself. And I know this is probably outside of documentation and communication, but a strong handshake goes a long way, especially as a woman, because men don't expect us to have a strong handshake. And I swear to you, every man hand that I shake looks at me like, oh, wow, you have a strong handshake. And I'm like, did you expect me not to? I would definitely say those are probably some of the things that stick out to me.
Yeah, I agree with all those. In fact, when I was living in Seattle, that was we had a program that we would give families, after about, it was 6 weeks. After 6 weeks of like training and coming to the class on Saturdays, we would give the family a computer. And amongst all of that, we would talk about, how to build your resume, eye contact, and then, how to give a firm handshake. And I'm still a firm believer of, if a man shakes my hand, not in a strong fashion, that's just a pet peeve of mine. Like, it's something wrong there. That's just my pet peeve. Please don't be offended by this or anybody listening to it, but that's just my pet peeve.
Mine too.
Right. So
I'm
that's
like,
just
I'm like disgusted by it, honestly. What kind of handshake was that, bro?
Yeah. So I get it. I get it. That's just my thing. So I hope anyone listening, don't be offended. Just firm up the handshake. That's all I ask.
You're listening to Women in Linux.
Now, another point that you touched on was eye contact. I had a discussion with some people probably about 2 weeks ago, and we were talking about eye contact and how it's offensive in some cultures to give direct eye contact. So I'm a firm believer in direct eye contact. That I think that may be an American thing. I don't know. But in some cultures, it's not okay, I guess, maybe for the woman to look the man in the eye or give direct eye contact. So, I think that's just a matter of just doing some background on who you're talking to. And when you're giving your speeches, if it's, international or overseas or something like of that nature, that would be my only caution on the eye contact. But I'm a firm believer in it. I agree with you totally, 100%.
I've totally
Now,
heard that before as well.
yeah,
But I think that's based on uh, stuff that I probably don't agree with.
I agree. Now, we talked about your role at Barclays, but throughout your career, I'm sure you've had then just challenges. What was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome, just in progressing in your career and educating yourself?
I always put things back on myself. Right? I'm a big believer in accountability, and I feel like if you can walk out of each situation and say, okay, what could I have done better, then you're just in a better position. So I would say my biggest challenge throughout my career was getting out of my own way and just doing things. Because I can have a tendency to have ADD, and I want to focus on a whole bunch of different stuff. And sometimes that gets in the way of really excelling at one thing in particular. So, I'm not saying that you shouldn't focus on different things because I'm always going to, but definitely just putting things out there and not being afraid to fail, and knowing that if you do fail, you're going to learn a tremendous amount from that failure, and just being okay with whether it's public exposure or just if you believe in something, just put it out there because you never know who is going to serve and how that's going to impact them and in turn impact you. So every time that I've challenged myself to just put something out there publicly, it's had like resounding success, I would say. And it made me think about it like, okay, why didn't you just do it before, or why didn't you just take that same approach with that project or the one before that? So I always say that I think my biggest challenge is getting out of my own way because I'm accountable for my own life and my own career, and no one else is.
I can dig that. I think that goes along in tech very far. Um, and also, I would add to that the accountability. I would add persistence. You seem very persistent in what you want to accomplish and how you want things to look and what the outcome could be. So I would add persistence to that as well too. And that was our final question. But no, in old true fashion of Women in Linux, we want to end this on a shameless plug where you get a chance to shout out your dog, the stars, the moon, the eclipse, anything you feel that you want to say or you want to add that we didn't discuss. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, my dog's name is Jedi. Shout out to Jedi. But can I just do maybe a shout out to my local meetup here in New York, which is Securing Your Path.
Hmm.
I write these articles about, and it doesn't have to be tailored to women, but my target audience is women, to try to see like the 10 steps to forge your path into this field or in this industry, period. So it talks about some of the stuff that we talked about, like, trying to understand your discipline or what discipline is the right one for you, et cetera. So I have local meetups here in New York City. I'm trying to do them every month going forward, where we just meet up, we network, we'll have different types of talks, all about cybersecurity. So the next one coming up will be late September, and that one's around the industry, which we're calling it. So we'll have different women in different areas of cybersecurity who will have breakout sessions with a group of women who are interested in their discipline. So it'll really be a time for them to dig in, really understand where these women came from, how they got into their positions, some tried and true methods, some, real resources that they could go home and use, and really have some calls to action and take away a lot from a 2-hour session, and, maybe come back and somebody, who knows, may get a job from that meetup, or, say, okay, this is the industry that I want to be in, or this is the field that I want to be in. Now I've identified it, et cetera. So it's just a safe haven for a bunch of women to come, feel safe, and talk about cybersecurity and the things that they're interested in, and be open and honest and try to move forward. So I'm pretty excited about the next one.
Do you have a website on that?
Yep. Thanks for asking. It's www.securingyourpath.com, and I'll send it to you too, so maybe you can put it in your show notes or something.
Also, if you want to be found on social media, I know you're doing security, so feel free to give it out, or feel free not to give it out. Where can people find you if you would like for them to find you?
Yeah, sure. So I'm on LinkedIn as Quiessence Phillips, so I'm pretty sure I'm the only Quiessence Phillips. So you could probably just search for me there. And then on the other social platforms, I'm at It's Quiessence, so ITS Quiessence, and you'll have the spelling of my name, right?
Right, I have the spelling of your name and everything. Need not worry. All right, we want to thank you for your time. Thank you for your words of wisdom, and thank you for the advice that you shared with everyone today. A lot of things were things that I said, and some things are new. And I just want to congratulate you on your journey, and continue to get out of your own way, and encourage others to get out of their own way as well.
Well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to the podcast.
Thank you. You have a good day too.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Women in Linux podcast. Women in Linux is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization created to get women involved in the field of IT using Linux as a foundation. You can connect with Women in Linux through social media at Women in Linux on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. To join weekly meetups, go to meetups.com/Women in Linux. For more information and to connect with Women in Linux, go to www.womeninlinux.com.